Good evening. Welcome. My name is Bruce Campbell, and I'm the director of the Latino Latin American Studies program here at St. John's University and College of St. Benedict. Tonight's event is the third and final event in our spring 2018 series on immigrant voices in conversations about justice, a series of 3 public conversations with representatives of the Asamblea de Derechos Civiles, or Assembly for Civil Rights, a faith-based immigrant empowerment organization here in Minnesota. The underlying theme of these conversations is justice, and the premise of the series is that the fraught national conversation about immigration is frequently not a conversation in which immigrants have a voice. While there is much heated talk about immigrants, in which immigrants are an object of reference, there is considerably less public talk in which immigrants are a party to the discussion. Immigrants, in other words, are too often object instead of actor, problem instead of person, divisive topic rather than conversational partner. In any conversation about justice, listening is essential. Argentine philosopher, historian, and theologian Enrique Dussel argues that a conversation about what is right, about what is just, must open to the voices of the excluded, to hear and acknowledge their lived material circumstances. As immigrant journalist Aura Bogado observed during the immigrants' rights mass mobilizations in 2006, the voices of immigrants are frequently excluded and sometimes muted, despite their relevance to the decision-making of the broader community. Quote, "The immigrant community has been too busy working double and triple shifts, harvesting crops, tending gardens, washing dishes, building homes, and taking care of other people's children." I'm very honored to introduce to you tonight 3 panelists from the Asamblea de Derechos Civiles who will speak about the organization's work to empower immigrants to contribute to their communities and to the nation through civic action and to advocate for just policies. Tonight we have with us our very own Gladys Gutierrez, a community organizer for Asamblea, Patty Keeling, Vice President of Asamblea, and Luz Lopez, Secretary of Asamblea's Board of Directors. Please join me in a warm welcome.
Perfect. Can you hear me? Yes? Perfect. All right. Well, again, my name is Luz Lopez. I'm an organizer here with the Asamblea de Derechos Civiles. And so for those of you who haven't been to the forum the last 2 times, I'm just going to give you a rundown of what it is that we do when we were formed, that kind of information. So our organization was founded in the year of 2006. In that year, there was committed, like our co-founders were already doing the work before they actually became a nonprofit organization. The reason for this is because the immigrant community at that time was facing like mass deportation. Actually in that year was the year that my mother was deported as well. I was 9 years old at the time, and that's my first involvement with Asamblea. 2 co-founders went to my house, they spoke to me, and they got me engaged in giving my testimony out to churches about this. Again, we are a nonprofit organization, and the work that we do is primarily funded through grants, our sustainable donors as well, and we do fundraising. So we are a faith-based organization. We work primarily in Catholic churches, but we do have alliance with like the Jewish community and other faiths as well. And we work primarily, again, with the undocumented Latino community, but because of this administration, you know, we're expanding to like the other immigrant communities as well. And I also want to emphasize that we are a community issue-based organization. We don't have our own agenda. Whatever issues that the community is facing is what we focus on. So for example, when the repeal of DACA came around, you know, like we had an action actually that very same day that Gladys was a part of. And that's what we've been pushing for, you know, that Clean Dream Act ever since then. Also, we'll talk more about it throughout the presentation, but one of our co-founders, Antonia Alvarez, was having issues with the mobile home park in St. Anthony, Laurie Grove, where people were displaced, and there's just, there's going to be no affordable housing in that new area for the people that used to live there. So we've taken on that housing campaign as well. We focus also on like policing and just training for the community overall. So with that, I move into the type of work that we do. We're a grassroots organization, which means that we organize from the bottom up. So again, we listen to the issues that the community has, and we do that by engaging with them like during or after Mass at churches that we go out to. And I guess, do you want to add something onto that as to like grassroots organizing?
Yeah, so basically grassroots organizing, again, is what Luz mentioned earlier. It's from the bottom up. So that means that we don't have an agenda. We don't go to the churches and ask the priests, yo, what's the problem with your community? No, we talk to the individual families, and they express their concerns, whether it be with the schools and their, with problems with their children in schools or affordable housing. So that's how we've actually identified these overarching campaigns, so immigration, Dream 2050, and affordable housing, by going to the people. Like Lou said, last year, September 5th, that's when DACA was repealed. So immediately, we had not planned to take 4 trips to Washington, D.C. with 50 people on board. It happened because there was a need in the community and we had to address it, and we still are addressing it to this day. As we know, with the political climate, DACA/Clean Dream Act has not been solved yet. It's still we're still in treading water with that issue. So
I want to expand also like on immigration. So there was a repeal of DACA. We're also pushing for like the Clean Dream Act, excuse me. We want to include, like the original dreamers, the parents of the these undocumented folks, and we're beginning to work closely now with the Liberian community in the Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park. They are going to be losing TPS at the end of March, at the end of this month, actually. So we've been working with them. We've been doing what we call Know Your Rights training, which again I'll get into more as the presentation goes along. And so another campaign that we're working on is what we call Dream 2050, which is a campaign around democracy, and it's looking like 30 years ahead. So we're looking this year to focus heavily on the midterm elections and making sure that we build that political power so that, like as, I don't know, poli-sci students here know that politics is who gets what, when, how. And so we want to make sure that our communities are involved in that process as well. So, there's going to be a large number of eligible voters that are going to be able to vote at the midterm election. So we want to make sure that they know the right information and make sure that they vote so that their voices are actually heard. So I mentioned a little bit about that affordable housing campaign that we're working on. We're still fighting real hard for Lori Grove. As far as I understand, there's supposed to be a fund for the residents, and this fund is supposed to kind of help them alleviate the cost of like moving and things like that, and the developers have not paid into that fund. And there's loopholes right now that, they're not forcing them. There's no consequences if they don't pay, and these people have been displaced, Kind of a trigger warning here to suicide, but there was actually a man who committed suicide 3 days before they had to leave the park. He'd lived there forever, and he saw their homes being demolished, and unfortunately, he just could not take that. So we're working really hard on that. We understand that housing is not just an immigrant issue. It's an issue that affects, poor people. But with that, also, a lot of poor people are people of color. So that's something that we were doing in Lori Grove. We're going to be expanding. We've been doing work in Rockville and St. Cloud. I think we're looking in Cold Spring. I think we're looking at Melrose as well. Yep. And I'm a new organizer to the organization, so I'm going to be working in Lakeville, because I know that there's some issues there as well. So I don't know if either one of you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay, sounds good.
Hello, can you hear me? All right, so when talking about building power in these immigrant communities, specifically undocumented immigrant communities, but also keeping in mind that there are other people who have been disenfranchised and underserved, such as POC, low-wealth people, and people of different religions within St. Cloud and the greater Minnesota area. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of the voice of immigrants in public policy. So the best strategy that Asamblea de Derechos Civiles uses to really get the voice of immigrants in public policy is through testimonies. Now, many of you would consider this to be more like lobbying, where you have, I don't know, who has heard of lobbying? So you go to the Capitol, you give this little 30-minute speech and try to get your representative to listen to you. Well, we think those are good, but we use testimonies because testimonies, in our experience, we've learned that our stories of struggle bring light to the issue in a more personal matter. So as Bruce actually said earlier, when we talk about immigrants, we see them as an object. We talk about them, but we don't give them the space to talk for themselves. So there's this power in when our people come out and tell their own stories. So it is through testimonies that we see more changes in public policy versus presenting facts and numbers about immigrants and about what we bring to the table. So like, oh, immigrants contribute this much to the economy. Immigrants pay taxes. Yes, we do all of that. But if we stop looking at immigrants as such a price tag and think of their price tag being the power, that actually is diminishing their power. Because we are not just price tags, we're living human, breathing humans that participate, and it's important to give credit to that. So some examples of this process, for example, we actually have these rides to emancipation. Like I said, in the last year, we didn't know that we were gonna take 4 trips to Washington, D.C., but given the circumstances and the need in our community, we did it because it was important to bring the stories of the Dreamers and the DACA beneficiaries to Washington, D.C. So we visited Congress. It's important, like within our state, that we visit Tom Emmer, who is our representative in our district, District 6. But when they see a bus of 50 people pulling up to their office, they're like, whoa. Immediately, they don't even want to let us into their office because they don't think they can contain us. But I mean, just that's how we show our power, bringing our people out and letting them speak for themselves. So something that we believe in Asamblea is we don't believe in speaking for others. Like, I don't want to speak for Luz. I don't want to speak for any of you because I got the mic right here and I can just hand it to you and have you speak for yourself. I have no reason to speak for anybody. I don't feel comfortable speaking for anybody but myself. So there's a sense of dignity in that as well, and we take pride in that. So something else that I want to talk about a little, oh, and these are more pictures from our ride to emancipation. So like we were a part of United We Dream, which is the campaign that really sparked, the national campaign that really sparked right after DACA was repealed. So that's where we have the orange T-shirts, the bright orange T-shirts. And yeah, you want to talk a little bit about that? Yeah.
I actually ended up going to one of the rides to emancipation that we call them, and what we did is we started in Minneapolis, and then we went over to Iowa, and then we did an action on Chuck Grassley, I believe, and then we went over to Wisconsin, and that same day, and we did an action on at Paul Ryan's office, and then we went to Chicago where we rested, and then we headed out to D.C., and being in D.C. was awesome. I mean, we went to bug all the representatives, and actually we did a little bit of door knocking. One of our co-founders was doing a hunger strike for 12 days, and so we went to each of the congressional offices, and like we left our flyers and everything like that. And it was a really interesting experience because you got to see like firsthand how these people that make the decisions for you actually treat you. You know, like I had heard a story from somebody that had heard a representative who was walking with like 2 aides and said, why don't they just call ICE and kick him out of here? And you know, and it's really sad because we brought grandmothers, we brought mothers and their little babies, and you know, they're actually talking to us in that manner. But it was very powerful to see all these, I guess, brown people that are normally would not be in these spaces say, hey, what you're doing is wrong, and what you're doing is actually affecting me. Because I don't think a lot of these politicians get to see like the faces that they're, you know, affecting. So it was amazing, and it was an amazing experience, and we had a lot of support doing this, and it gives us the opportunity to hold our representatives accountable. We spoke to all MN representatives and, you know, beyond that as well. So just a little bit of that. Yeah.
And to speak a little bit more of that, you just opened a can of worms. We brought people not only, like she said, one of our leaders was fasting for 12 days, and we bugged each one of our district representatives, but we brought people from each of those districts. So not only from St. Cloud or the cities, but down south and up north of Minnesota and across the state, we brought people to speak and, you know, hold each of their representatives responsible and get that testimony. You know, that's how we build power, by telling our story and our testimony. So even if they're not going to change anything right away, it's in their conscious, it's in the back of their head. Like, my struggle is in your hands. Like, my issue is in your hands, and you need to be responsible, and you need to be held accountable because your decisions affect my life. So that's really important in our trips to Washington, D.C., and our leaders and our members get so much out of it. I mean, the transformations that we see with our people going to lobby is really, really gifting. All right, so now I want to speak about engagement on a more local level. So just recently, actually, a few weeks ago, we were able to sign off on a St. Cloud and Communities of Color police agreement. So this agreement actually originated around 2005, where there was a big influx of immigrants. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but St. Cloud, way back then, was known as White Cloud. All white people, barely any POC. So in 2005, there started to be a lot more immigrants. We started to get an influx of different religions, people, languages, and the newcomers didn't feel safe, or they felt afraid in reporting issues to the St. Cloud Police Department because they thought, oh my goodness, what if I report an issue and they think that I'm the issue? And now I'm in trouble trying to seek protection or report a problem. So they didn't want to get caught up in that, and we thought it was really important to establish an agreement. So that happened in 2005, but the problem is that agreement was not revisited until the last year. Now, as we know, after the 2016 elections, there's a lot of turmoil. Our people have been polarized, and we thought it was really important to revisit this issue, this agreement actually. So we got together again with the St. Cloud Police Department and local organizations, and we started drafting the agreement, and there was a lot of changes to be made. So for the past year, we have invested much of Assemblea's time and efforts to make this agreement benefit our people. And what the agreement does for our people, so within the agreement, we see many sections that are put in place to ensure our policemen are truly doing their jobs with the intention of protecting and serving all of the communities within St. Cloud. So there's sections such as unbiased policing, which is funny because that section before we revisited the agreement was called biased policing. So we're like, wait, I thought we were trying not to do that. So we changed the name to unbiased policing. We had other sections such as immigration, complaint process. And to be honest, the most important section to our community is the immigration section. So this is because many of our people are undocumented and they don't have the opportunity to access a driver's license, where when we go to the DMV, we already have a social security number, and that's how we access our driver's license. Undocumented folk don't have that social security number and cannot access a driver's license. what we've noticed in our communities is that's how people get to ICE. And are separated from their family because you're driving to work, you're driving home, you're pulled over for a basic traffic stop. You have insurance, but you don't have a driver's license. Taken to jail, which wouldn't happen to our white brothers and sisters. You know, you get a citation or a warning at the least. And that's what we were seeing. But with this agreement, the St. Cloud Police Department, with push of our community, has put in the agreement that an undocumented person will not be detained or sent to ICE for driving without a driver's license, as long as they can verify their identity through either a passport from their country of origin or a matricula, which is also a picture ID from their country of origin. And they can get that from the Mexican consulate or the Salvadorian consulate or wherever their place of their country of origin is. So now because of this agreement, we've actually asked the Wake Park Police Department, which is a neighboring city, to do the same. And Chief Dave Bentrude has agreed, and we're in the beginning stages of a 3-month process for the Wake Park Police Department and community to do the same. So that's a really, really big win. We're hoping that this is not a year-long process. We hope we can use the agreement that we already had that we just signed off on and then just make some changes. So that's a really, really big win for our community, and eventually we'll bring it to more surrounding places. So yeah. And with that.
All right. So we had an action at the Stearns County Jail, and I'll give you a little bit of background. So, again, as Gladys said, like there was folks that were being detained and then funneled to ICE, and then being deported. And the reason this was happening is because, like when folks were being stopped by Stearns County deputies, they claimed that they had a policy that said that they had to do this. So we started hearing about these reports of people getting caught up with Stearns County and getting deported. And so what we did is that in 2015, in like July of 2015, we invited the sheriff to speak to our community at St. Joseph's Church and address these issues with them and kind of like open that line of communication with them. They publicly said that they would be more than happy to speak with us about this, and we found that that was not true. That was not the case. We tried multiple times, myself included and Patty, to get in contact with them to have a meeting and discuss these things. So before we did the action, I actually had access to the policy, which I'm going to read you a few things out of it. So according to the policy, the purpose of this policy is to make sure that the jail does their due work, I guess, and make sure that the other government of the foreign national, if you will, is aware that somebody has been detained, right? That's the purpose of it. But here, it actually allows deputies to determine the foreign national's country. And how they do that is by looking at their passport or travel documents, which I don't know who carries their passport. I certainly don't when I drive. If they specifically tell you that their place of birth is outside of the United States, lack of a U.S. driver's license, which apparently that qualifies you as a foreign national, or inability to speak English, which at its root is it's racist. Just because you don't speak English doesn't mean really anything. I mean, I'm a U.S. citizen and Spanish was my first language. I didn't learn English first, but anyway, so they had this policy in place, and then what they would do is they would run your information through a database and determine your legal status. At that point, they would detain you in the jail and then wait for ICE to come by. And I'll have you folks know that that is not the job of law enforcement to do. That's ICE's job. There's no reason why law enforcement should be doing that job for them. It's a waste of your money. So anyway, they were not meeting with us, and we had to do what we had to do, and we held an action. We staged a sit-in. So what we did is we rallied folks outside. We said that we were going to have a vigil, and then we went inside the building. We had signs. We brought in testimonies, like families that had actually been affected by this policy. And we sat in there until they gave us a meeting, because again, they were not trying to talk to us. They were not genuine about opening that line of communication. So, we were able to get that meeting with the sheriff. We made him sit down with us and listen to the stories of people that had been affected, families destroyed. Separation of families, really an awful thing. And so we're still discussing this policy. So, but we did get out of that a training for the Stearns County Department. And the training was just to make sure that they knew kind of like the history of the immigrant community, and they gained that understanding. I think they just didn't know. And so that's where we come in. So I'll let Patty talk about that.
So when we had this training, of course, they all come in their uniforms and in their cars outside of our church. The parking lot is filled with their cars. But we had many, many immigrants that also came to share their stories, because we wanted them to actually mingle with our Latino community. And so at first they sat on one side, and our brothers and sisters sat on the other side. But as we started the training, and everybody started to feel more comfortable, and they heard the stories, and they heard the struggles. There were many young officers there that were very, very open and willing to then sit right next to an immigrant and talk and converse. However, a number of the older ones weren't as open, but we did have group discussions, and it was a very good training for them. And we now that was the patrol department. Now we're focusing on getting the jail administration to okay that their department will come in, because of course we haven't noticed as many people stopped and picked up since that training, which is very good. But we've noticed that we are having more injustices in the jail themselves. So that's our hope to next, get the jail department in there so that they can also listen to the stories, and hopefully we can change their hearts too.
And I guess it's worth mentioning with this training, it was like an immigration training, and we had a timeline of when there was an influx of immigrants coming from different parts of the world. So it was actually, we did the exercise where if you know your ancestors, if you know your family's heritage or history, go and stand by the year or the time when your ancestors or grandparents or great-great-grandparents came to the country. And I mean, I knew when my family came to the country. It's not very many generations far, but it was really interesting to see how some of the older officers and younger officers didn't know. They were so far removed from their own history, and that was so interesting to me. So that made me think, okay, well, is this why there was a lot of insensitivity before this training? So hopefully they took something out of it, and maybe that's why we're not having as many injustices and discriminatory, racially, discriminatory practices and traffic stops that are motivated by racial profiling, which was really, really amazing to see. And some of them got something out of it and some of them didn't, but like we said, we're having this ongoing dialogue, which we had never had before. But there's still work to do. And with that, we will move on to Know Your Rights trainings.
Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, Asamblea is built based on the needs of our community. our people have generally been underserved. And so we've noticed that the trainings around the state is that undocumented immigrants are unaware of that they have basic human rights. And so we need to give them a tool. We felt we needed to give them a tool to understand that, yes, you have the right to, for work-related injustices, for housing injustices, for, anything that would be happening to you. You have the right, and to bring it not only to the police department or whatever legal service there is. We work with the Minnesota Legal Services, so they can go there and report. We work with the state Minnesota Department of Human Rights, which has an office here in St. Cloud and in Minneapolis. So we've used them, worked really hand in hand with them when we've gone out to do these trainings. We've done role-playing at these trainings to show them how to address an officer stopping you, if it's a traffic stop, or a boss, making you work long hours and only getting paid, that fee. There's many injustices that are happening to these people. Well, to our people, excuse me, not these people, they're our people. But I think hand in hand, we gave them all packets at these trainings, and in those packets were valuable information, like we had a green card and they were told not to open their doors if ICE would come or any officer would come, unless they saw the search warrant, which there are 3 different kinds of warrants. One is an ICE warrant, which is not, you do not have to open your door at all for an ICE warrant. They do not. So anyway, that's in the packet. So if they are aware that that's who's at their door, they can, view that as it's passed under their door, and they can then decide and tell them, and if they can't speak the language that the officer is talking, there is a green card which states their rights on that card. So, and basically tells them that, they're not going to speak with them because of this. But we do have some of those cards with us, and so after, if anybody is willing or wants to see them, we also have the folders that we would be more than willing to give the teachers or anybody else that wants them, and you can, go to your teachers and see those, view those, but they're full of, most of them, of course, are in Spanish.
So with these trainings, it's really a tool in protecting community. So as Patty said, there's a lot of instances where we can avoid family separation. With the search warrants, there's 3 kinds of warrants. And the first one is simply to arrest someone, and it has to be signed by a judge. How many of you guys know what an arrest warrant looks like? I hope you don't. I hope you don't. But it needs to be signed by the court, and then that means with that arrest warrant, they don't need to go into your house. Many people think, oh my goodness, this is an arrest warrant. So then the ICE or the police officers come into your house and in turn take more people hostage, is what we say, because essentially we think it's like kidnapping our people. And there's another warrant, which is a search warrant. And with that, you do have to open your door. So with our community knowing what these look like, we're really equipped to protect our families and keep our families together. Like Patty said, we've partnered with the Department of Human Rights, African Career Education Resources, or ACER, and we were able to train 7,000 families in the last year. So these are just some of the pictures we would go, like Patty said, after church service or worship service to train our communities to have this tool.
And just something that I want to let you folks know real quick is that, so when we give these packets, it'll go through all the role-playing scenarios that we do. So we go through like what happens if they come at your door, what happens if you get stopped, what happens if you're being raided at work, or what happens if you get stopped just like randomly on the street, because it can happen. And so these packets will go through each of those scenarios once again so that you have it. In addition to that, we have a kind of an outline of what a power of attorney looks like. And the power of attorney we let people know about because, you know, when parents are deported, you know, who takes care of the kids? Who's going to take care of the finances? That kind of thing. We have to be sure that our communities are prepared to handle that kind of thing. In the back also we have a list of legal resources that our organization trusts that we know are not going to, I'm very sorry, but screw over our communities, because we've heard stories of people taking advantage of the situation. You know, powers of attorney they shouldn't cost anything. You know, it's a fairly simple thing to do, but we found that there were lawyers that were charging folks like up to $1,000 for something like this when it's free, you know, and taking advantage of our hardworking people. And so these packets are really, really important, and they can be decisive for our communities. So frankly, I think that if back in 2006 my family had that training, my mom would not have been deported. I'll let you know just really quickly, you know, they came to my door specifically saying that they were police officers. They didn't have any like police uniform. They weren't wearing any ICE uniform or anything like that. And they came in with the excuse that here's a black man that we're looking for around in your neighborhood. Can we come in and ask you about it? They come in with lies. They lied to our community. They're really pretty awful people. But just want to like let you guys know, like, these Know Your Rights trainings are super duper duper important. So.
Yep. And then.
Okay, so leadership training. This is very important for developing the base of Asamblea. It is as part of our work to build justice for Latino communities. Asamblea has always committed to engaging Latino voters or not, in local, state, and national elections. Because of this commitment, we have registered voters, we've organized debates, candidate forums, and we do know, well, we have a lot of experience with these forms. In fact, through the work that we did, we were able locally to get someone into the Stearns County Commissioner office that has really been a part of and he's come to many of our meetings and everything, so we know that he was a good candidate. Even though we are a organization that we can't decide, I mean, we can't promote a candidate, but just putting him there with the other candidates, people could decide and hear and listen, because many people don't know what a county commissioner does even. So that's it's an educational tool that was very helpful. We have always believed that the Latino vote is the deciding vote, because this because of this, we're committed to ensuring voter turnout and large numbers. And I just want to read this because this is from the Pew Research Center. In 2016, there were 96,000 Latino eligible voters in Minnesota, and an estimated 800,000 of newly eligible voters, 18 years old, turn that age every year. And this is just the Latinos. So if we can reach out to all the homes that have a Latino in them, think of how much more powerful we can be. And that's why we're pushing for voter engagement. And the way we do that is with trainings again, but also with a system that's called Voter Activation Network, or VAN, which gives us information about, like if we put in the system that we wanted to know where all the Latinos in St. Cloud lived, it would put out the address, the name, and we could go to that house and find out how many live there, and if there are any 18-year-olds that are not registered yet. And one other thing too is when they did this study, they found that it was about, you know, having relationships with people. So it's going out and knocking on doors and finding out and talking to people and finding out, you know, what is working for you and what isn't. So if you can have those conversations, I think it just means that you can build more power and possibly, you know, make a definite difference in the election for 2018. And we know that this is really crucial. And in fact, we went in February, I believe, to a CRI training, which is Civil Rights of Immigrants, in Ferguson, Missouri. Does anybody aware of what happened in Ferguson, Missouri? Okay, I see a lot of heads shaking. Does anybody not know what happened? Okay, so a black man was killed by, you know, a policeman. And that set off, you know, major protests and everything. So anyway, we were in this area and asked to go out to these houses and talk with people. And why are they gonna open the door for us? Well, we knocked on the door and if they opened it, we asked, how is democracy working for you? And that set off, they really opened up. So we took names, telephone numbers, whatever we needed to do so that the people living there could go back to those people when they had talks or issues related to what they were interested in. And I think, you know, but in 2016, we did something very similar when we went out and had voter engagement and tried to get people registered. We had a survey that they listed what issues were most important to them. So, and actually we had just long lines of bricks. And I don't know if this picture shows it right now, but when you see the video, yeah.
Everybody cross your fingers and hope it works, because it didn't last time. I'm a dog lover, so
políticas públicas, pero no todos en nuestra comunidad podemos votar. ¿Usted va a votar?
Sí.
¿Por qué va a votar?
Bien, no son económicas.
¿Por qué va a votar?
Por migración.
So these are the roadblocks that Patty was talking about. And on here we had separate issues like housing, transportation,
¿Puedes votar
fill in
tú?
the blank of what you care
Haz
about.
que tu voto reconozca la dignidad de nuestra comunidad, porque el voto latino es el voto decisivo.
I think one more thing too, that these times when we go out, you notice that there were young people too. We involved the youth a lot so that they're aware of the issues, and they learn just as much as their parents do. And they're actually, many of them will be the ones that will be voting in years to come. So we need to keep them engaged in this process.
And just to wrap it up, so voter engagement is really another tool, and our ultimate goal in engaging Latino voters is, and POC to vote, is to obtain representation and power in politics. Like Lou said, it is through politics that we get to move things and create change. And something we didn't mention enough, I think, is like the leadership building that we invest a lot of our time in. We use leadership trainings as a tools for base building. Actually, Ashley over here came to our 2-day leadership training. We actually send our leadership to week-long trainings with our national network, Gamaliel. And I mean, our leaders are whipped up into shape. It's like they put a mirror. I went to one of these trainings, and it's like they put a mirror up to you. There's a lot of agitation. And agitation, we see it as an act of love, constantly being tested. Why are you here? Why are you in this movement? And it really breaks you down. But during that week, I felt like I was built into a completely new person. So if you want to be involved in social justice and you're interested in a training like that, we can provide that capacity. So to our leaders, again, like with us, these trainings are used to build capacity, really create community, and in turn build power. The sit-in at the sheriff's office, the Know Your Rights trainings, the leadership trainings that we have, we would not be able to do if we didn't have leaders. And leadership, like many would say, oh, this person is a leader, this person is a leader. Gladys is a leader, but I don't feel like a leader. It's a really, really long path, and there's a lot of qualities and experiences to obtain before someone can really be called a leader. I feel like we use the term leadership and leader very briefly in American culture. So yeah, that's building capacity, relationship building, and in turn to build power. So that sort of concludes it. Concludes our presentation on building power within immigrant communities. And I would like to mention some ways of getting involved with Asamblea de Derechos Civiles. So our regular Asamblea Immigration meeting, or AIM, our next meeting is going to be this coming Saturday, 17th. At 10 a.m., we have it at St. Joseph's Church in the basement, and there's the address there if you're interested. We'll also be having a leadership training from March 24th and 25th at Spelt's House. That's going to be here in Sauk Rapids. The normal cost of that is $250, but Asamblea takes pride in covering the costs. So it's free, but somebody's paying for it. And again, ways to get involved: make phone calls to Congress and Senate, ask them to pass a Clean Dream Act that includes their families. And finally, I would like to agitate you a little bit as an act of love. So I've talked to the Mecha students at St. Cloud State University, and they're on board to collaborate with Asamblea de Derechos Civiles. So I'm wondering if you students of College of St. Benedict, myself included, would like to participate in this procession to emancipation. So it's going to be from Monday, April 23rd to Monday, May 7th. We will be marching, walking from Brooklyn Park to the Minnesota State Capitol. How many of you guys know that distance? Driving is like 45 minutes, right, with traffic. Well, walking, it's going to be about 6 hours. 10 hours, because we're going to be making stops and eating. We're going to feed you. So we're going to be marching to the state capitol, demanding justice on issues such as mass incarceration, because as we know, our families are not simply being deported. The idea is not to deport people, it's to mass incarcerate them into private prisons and make about $200 per night per bed. That's what it is, mass incarceration of immigrants. It was the war on drugs way back then, now it's the war on undocumented immigrants. Next, justice for dreamers and their families, because again, we have that narrative of a dream for all. Affordable housing and driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. During April 23rd and May 7th, that's 15 days, again, one of our leaders, Antonia Alvarez, who's a mother of 4 dreamers, 3 dreamers, will be fasting for 15 days. She will not be eating. And she will be walking from Brooklyn Park to the Minnesota State Capitol with no shoes on. So if she can do that, I think we can walk for 10 hours with some tennis shoes. So yeah, the Mitcha students from St. Cloud State University will be joining us. If you are interested in truly taking a step towards the liberation of your community, because my salvation, my liberation is tied to each and every one of you, even if you see it or not. I know there's tension in the room, but our people are suffering these issues every single day, and it hurts my heart. And it should hurt yours. So with that being said, this concludes the 3 panel sessions with Asamblea de Derechos Civiles in collaboration with the Hispanic Studies here at St. Ben, St. John's. Thank you very much for having us, you guys. I'll see you around.
So we've got some time for question and answer stuff, and I'll just circulate with the microphone. Questions?
Hi, my name is Rita. I just had a quick question on what the purpose of the ICE warrant is.
The what?
The ICE warrant.
Yes, so the ICE warrant is essentially that, Luz, can you talk a little bit more about that? I think you have a good idea, a better idea of what that is.
ICE? What, like the
An ICE warrant.
The warrant.
Oh, the warrant. Oh, okay. So, Lord Jesus.
It's not signed by a judge.
Right. So they have like different types of warrant, and I'm really sorry. I wish I knew exactly what it is, but like so there's a search warrant that allows them to come into your home, and then they have another type of like paper that they'll show to people, and it's essentially it's all like a memo. That's all it is. It's a memo within like I guess DHS that says that we're here to like pick up this particular person. So what they do is like they'll come to your door and then they'll show you this memo, which is not a search warrant. It's not like you're asking for somebody to come out like this is who we're coming to get. It's just a memo. And people get freaked out because they don't know the difference between all 3. They open the door and then it just opens the gates of hell, essentially. So I hope that answers your question. I'll get you more information. We can connect.
So unless, if you want to give this information to a family that is vulnerable, the only time you have to open your house is when there is a court order that says search warrant and is signed by a judge. Other than that, if ICE or a police officer shows up to your house, like they could show up to your house with a picture of me, and you know what I look like, but you don't have to open the door. They can come up with names, with pictures, whatever. You don't have to open a door unless it's a court-issued search warrant. Now, if they're looking for a specific person and it's a court-issued warrant of arrest, then only that person has to exit the house. And I would suggest them exiting out of the back door. And for some of you, this information is like, yo, I know I would never have to worry about this, but this is happening. This is happening every day in our communities, and this is how we are staying together with these tools. So I hope that information is helpful, and if you need more, we can help you afterwards.
Other questions?
Thank you for taking the time to be here. First of all, I was here during all 3 of your sessions, and I just really appreciate all the information that that you brought to our campuses, and thank you for making us uncomfortable because we need it. So for this procession to emancipation, so what day exactly is the march? Because that's 15 days, and there's,
Yeah.
school, and it's the last week of school, too.
Right.
So which day exactly, and where do we meet? How do we get there?
Right, so the Monday, we're actually going to be bringing a bus from St. Cloud. So I can give you a ride to St. Joseph's Church, which is the pickup location. It's like the central location. So we'll be taking a bus to the cities and then landing in Brooklyn Park and then starting the walk. The bus will be following us. We're gonna be bringing children, grandmothers. My grandmother's coming. Old ladies, we're gonna bring the whole family, and if they need time to rest, they can just hop on the bus.
And we're planning to we're gonna do a few stops along the way. We're gonna be stopping at Brooklyn Center, City Hall, St. Anthony City Hall, Laurie Grove, and I believe downtown Minneapolis. So we're going to be making stops, doing actions there as well. And for the 15 days that Antonia's doing the fasting, we're going to be holding actions I think every other day. So we're still working on the logistics of that and what exactly we'll be doing, but there'll be plenty of opportunity for
The first day is when we're gonna do the 10 hours.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be early in the morning, we're gonna get there at 9. Yes, the 23rd, that's when we're gonna, hopefully, that's the plan, to walk 10 hours from the morning until late. So honestly, that's when we probably need the biggest crowd. So when the helicopter comes to the top, they can see a lot of people. So if you're interested in being on TV, let us know.
Other question?
I just want to ask, is everybody registered to vote in this room?
Good question.
Raise your hand if you are not registered to vote. No.
Okay, raise your hand if you are registered to vote. Woo woo in the house. Okay, I'm proud of my Johnnies and Bennies.
So I do have registration forms. If you want to, yes. If you want to register now, tonight, you're certainly welcome. We'll get it to the proper place. And be sure that you're able to vote. You know that there are 2 professors from here in St. John's that are running for an office, so wouldn't you like to be a part of them winning? Not that I'm trying to persuade you.
Neither one of them is present right now, just to be clear. Questions? I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the connection. Gladys, you made it right at the end. You talked about your own emancipation is tied to the emancipation of undocumented people. I'm wondering if you could talk, and earlier you talked about how the arguments in favor of a immigrant-friendly politics in the United States tend to be based on economics, right? This whole conversation that you all have presented has been about political empowerment, political participation. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the connection between the empowerment of immigrants and the broader benefit to the broader community, the state of Minnesota, Stearns County, the nation.
Yeah, so I don't like the term empowerment. But I mean, to address that, the word empowerment is in a sense is saying, I'm gonna give you power, Lucy. Here, come get it. Come get your power. We already all have power. In Spanish, it's called poder. Yo puedo hacer esto. Power, I can do this. So the ability to act is what we call power. So power is already in each and every one of us. It's a matter of investing in your leadership and your skills in order to really polish that leadership. And to address the question having to do with when we see immigrants as a contribution to our economy and not necessarily as human beings who deserve to be here, it's for Bruce, I would never question, but Bruce needs to be here. He contributes to the economy, you know. So it's the same
It's
thing.
true.
It's the same thing. It's we have to see immigrants and our people as people. I mean, even with the word immigrants, we all. I mean, it's the dumb. We talked about this all so much, where everybody emigrated to this country at one point. So just really humanizing, thinking that we are human beings and we're dreamers. Born in this country or not, we're all dreamers. And as human beings, we're meant to be with one another. We're meant to love. We're meant to coexist with one another. So I'm not trying to sound too kumbaya, but I mean, like at like essentially, like when we use the words like illegal, alien, like man, like there's Martians on Earth. Like when did that happen? So these terms are really ugly, and when we start telling our stories, that's when we start to get our power back. The power that we've always been told as immigrants, like we've been victimized, like, oh, those poor immigrants. Oh, those poor immigrants are being deported. They're poor, they don't have money. But we are very able and smart and capable beings. I mean, my mother and my father may not have a college education, but God dang it, they're smarter than me. And they didn't go to college. So it's really humanizing the immigrant, and I lost my train of thought. But I had something really smart to say. I promise. So to that's why it's important to tell our stories. Cesar Chavez once had a really, really cool quote that I really hope I'm not forgetting, but you can't uneducate the person who has learned how to read. You can't basically instill fear in the person who does not have fear in their heart. So basically, like, we cannot be silenced. And it's a chain effect. Once we start relationship building and engaging the community and bringing our community into the public arena, that's when we truly build power, cohesive power, everlasting power, which I think that's what the founding fathers wanted to do. I think we're just forgetting.
And I'm going to bring you guys down really quick. I'm so sorry. But I think it's in citizens' best interest to kind of keep an eye on what's happening to immigrants, like undocumented immigrants and legal residents. Just because, you know, there's a Supreme Court decision, I don't know if you guys heard about it, they have the ability to detain immigrants indefinitely. And that's creating essentially a slave labor. That's what that is. And so, again, it's in your best interest as citizens to watch that, because it's them today and it's gonna be you tomorrow, you know? My parents are both undocumented immigrants, and I'm a citizen because I was born here, but I know that there has already been a bill introduced that intends to strip my citizenship away. And then who's next, you know? And it's like this othering that's like really, really dangerous. Well, they cross the border and they're criminals and they don't deserve human rights. Well, you're disabled and you don't contribute to this economy, and therefore you don't deserve health care.
And it's not only that.
Things
I
like
mean,
that.
I've worked in labor rights where unions have done a lot of good for our working families, where now unions are after attack, where families such as, like, if your parents are teachers and they have a union, they're trying to get rid of sick days. So what happens when you can't take a sick day and you have to call off? You have kids, you have to take care of your kids. You're losing your job because you can't take sick days. And that's protected by unions. So what Luz is trying to get at is, well, I think that's what you're trying to get at, I'm not gonna speak for you, is like, first, like, it's the immigrants of people of color, but they're coming after everybody, yo. Like, my liberation is truly tied to yours. Because if you're not part of the 1%, like, I'm sorry, dude, but they're gonna come after you too. And like what the quote is, once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. And you cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore. So yeah, we truly follow that.
Thank you.
And also to mention that in our procession to emancipation, we will be commemorating Martin Luther King Jr., Cesar Chavez, Monseñor Romero, Dolores Huerta, and a bunch of those cool people that did some liberation theology stuff. Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Everyone's being very careful not to move their hands. Well, if there are no further questions, thank you for coming. Thank you all very much.